Are you chasing growth because it's profitable or because everyone says you should? Are you saying yes to clients because they're good for your business or because you're afraid to say no? Are you hiring because you need more capacity or because you don't understand your current capacity levels? These are the questions that separate firms that scale sustainably from the firms that scale into chaos. I spent 14 years at WPP and Kantar, worked with agencies and firms from a few to 5,000 people, and I've learned some things about professional services that are not spoken about nearly often enough. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to share 7 lessons I learned from working inside some of the world's largest professional services organizations. You may not read these lessons in business books, but they are uncomfortable truths I've uncovered about what makes firms succeed or fail. My name is Mike Hiley. I'm a chartered accountant with 30 years of professional services experience. I'm a former CFO and a former business transformation leader at Kantar. If you're running a firm of up to 200 people, this is specifically for you. The first lesson is the best firms are not necessarily the biggest firms. Here's something most people don't understand about large holding companies like WPP. They're not monolithic organizations. They're collections of operating companies that usually range between 40 and 250 people. When I was there, the best performing operating companies had something in common. They were small enough to move fast, but big enough to have real process, but not too big that they became bureaucracies. In fact, many of the challenges they faced stem from their role within the holding company. They had to face organizational nightmares, layers of management, decision paralysis, and margin compression due to overhead growing faster than billable capacity. The sweet spot, from what I've observed, was somewhere between 50 and 300 people. You had enough scale to have systems, enough specialization to be excellent at something specific, but not so much complexity that you couldn't move. The takeaway is, don't worship size for its own sake, worship the right size for your model. The second lesson is, at certain stages, growth and profit move in opposite directions. Nobody ever talks about this. Everyone celebrates a 50% revenue growth, but here's what typically happens. You grow from 10 to 15 million, and congratulations. So then you hired 15 new people because you won 3 new big clients. So then you open a new office. And then your margin drops from 20% to 8% and you're scratching your head wondering why. Well, there are 4 reasons. Number 1, new people take 6 months to ramp up, and during that time, they consume senior capacity without producing billable work. And number 2, new clients are unpredictable. You don't know their patterns yet. You overstaff to be safe, and that's bench cost. Number 3, a new office means new infrastructure, new tools, new systems, and new coordination overhead. And number 4, your existing teams are stretched supporting this new growth. They're doing less billable work and more internal work. So revenue does go up, but profit goes down, and everyone wonders why. I see this pattern repeatedly. The best performing operating firms grew at steady, disciplined rates, and the ones chasing aggressive growth looked impressive in presentations, but struggled operationally. And look, don't get me wrong. If you have the cash flow and you have the budget in order to grow 50% and do all of those things, that's fine. But you need to understand that that will have an impact on your operating profit, certainly in the short term. So growth is not necessarily the goal. Profitable, cash positive growth is the goal. And those two things are very, very different. The third lesson is clients respect you more when you say no. And this one is counterintuitive, but it is true. When I was at Kantar, we had a Fortune 500 client. In fact, I think it was actually a Fortune 100 client because it's one company you've probably all heard of. It was a huge account, but they would call with requests that were always out of scope, and they were constantly asking for more. Early on, we'd say yes to everything because we wanted to be helpful and we wanted to protect the relationship. But what happened? They just kept asking for more and more. The requests got bigger and the timelines got tighter. Our team was burning out, and the client, well, they didn't value the work anymore. In fact, they probably valued it less. Because when you say yes to everything, you signal that your time isn't valuable. Then we changed, and we started saying no. Not rudely, not aggressively, but just professionally. We'd say things like, well, that's outside of the scope of this engagement, and we're happy to discuss expanding the scope, but we will need to adjust the timeline and budget. And you know what happened? There was some pushback, but the request stopped being so frivolous. They thought twice before asking. And when we did agree to expand the scope, they valued the work more because they knew it would cost something. Saying yes to everything doesn't make you a good partner. It makes you a doormat. I get it. Blue chip client logos look great on your website, but the clients who respect you are the ones who understand that you have boundaries. And the ones who don't respect your boundaries, they're the ones that are hemorrhaging your profits. They're not clients you want anyway. The fourth lesson is that hiring is about team composition and not individual talent. And this one is super nuanced and possibly a little bit controversial, but stay with me. When I was at WPP, hiring A players was essential. We had the budget, we had the resources, and we had the platform. When we brought in top talent, the business grew. The problem wasn't hiring A players. The problem was that we didn't sometimes hire A players. Or when we thought we were hiring players who turned out not to be. That created bigger issues than not hiring at all. But here's where it gets kind of complicated for smaller firms. If you're a 30-person agency and you stretch your budget to hire one person who worked at McKinsey, for example, or another major consulting firm, you might create a different type of problem. That person is used to working with other A-type players. They're used to working with resources that you don't have. And they're used to a pace and quality standard that probably your current team can't match. So they get frustrated, they don't fit, and they leave. The issue isn't that the A players are bad. In fact, if you can, you should definitely get them into your team. The issue is the fit and composition of the team. If you want to grow, you need to upgrade your whole team. You can't scale a B team to A-level work. At some point, you have to make the call. Are we building an A team or are we staying where we are? But bringing in an A player into a B team environment, that doesn't work for either party. The lesson isn't don't hire great people. It's understand what team you're building and hire accordingly. The fifth lesson is operational excellence is boring. And that's exactly why it's a competitive advantage. And look, I know nobody wants to hear this. Everyone wants a sexy strategy. They want the killer positioning and they want the great breakthrough creative. But here's what I've learned. The firms that dominate their categories long-term weren't the flashiest. They were the most operationally disciplined. They knew their numbers cold. They tracked profitability at the project level. And they managed capacity rigorously. They had clear processes for estimating, scoping, delivering, and billing. Yes, it was boring, but here's what it gave them. They could price confidently because they knew their costs. They could say no to bad work because they could see it coming. They could scale without breaking their systems. And they could invest in growth because they had margin to invest. The firms that failed, well, they were exciting. They had big ideas. They won pitches on creativity. They couldn't deliver profitably, and they couldn't scale properly. They burnt out their teams, and eventually they imploded. Operational excellence is not glamorous, but it does compound. Over 5, 10, 15 years, it's the only thing that matters. The sixth lesson is most professional services firms are running a subsidy model without realizing it. And here's what I mean, and it does touch on the third lesson about saying no to clients. If you have 20 clients, 5 of them are highly profitable, 10 break even, and 5 lose money, well, the 5 profitable ones are funding the rest. You're running a charity inside your business. And the reason is you don't see it. You're looking at aggregate numbers. Top line revenue looks good, overall margins look okay, and nobody's drilling down to client and project level profitability. I saw this constantly at Kantar with new acquisitions. Operating companies would show me their P&L, and it would say something like 10 to 15% margins. And they'd say, well, that looks solid, doesn't it? Then we'd implement a proper ERP and do the forensic work. We'd break it down by client, project, and service line. It turns out that 30% of their portfolio was a 40% margin, another 40% was break even, and 30% was destroying value. They were working harder to make less money. The fix isn't complicated. You find the losers, you either fix them, reprice them, or fire them, and you double down on the winners. But you obviously need to have the right systems in place in order to be able to see that information. But you can't do that if you don't know who's who. Most firms don't know, and that's why they're stuck. The seventh lesson is growth is great, but growth from a broken model is a disaster. I get it, everyone wants growth. That's natural. Growth means you're winning. Obviously, predictable growth is what you're looking for, slow, steady growth. But here's what I've learned. Growth doesn't fix problems, it exposes them. If you don't know which client's profitable, growth means you require more unprofitable clients. If you don't understand your capacity, growth means you'll hire people you don't need or put the wrong people on the wrong work. If delivery processes are chaotic, growth means more chaos at higher cost. The firms that scale successfully do something that's not sexy. They fix their foundations first. They get visibility into profitability. They understand their capacity. They have clear processes on scoping, delivering, and billing, and they know their numbers. Then they grow. The firms that fail, they chase growth while the model is broken. Revenue goes up, complexity goes up, Costs grow up faster than revenue, and margins compress, and finally your team will burn out. And 5 years in, they're bigger, more stressed, less profitable than when they started. Growth is not the enemy, but growth without foundations is. Fix your visibility, fix your model, and then fix your processes. Then scale. That's how you grow profitably instead of growing in chaos. So these are my 7 lessons from 30 years in the industry. You might not agree with all of them, and some might make you uncomfortable, and that's fine. The point isn't to follow some playbook. The point is to think critically about what you're building and why. Are you chasing growth because it's profitable or because everyone says you should? Are you saying yes to clients because they're good for your business or because you're afraid to say no? Are you hiring because you need more capacity or because you don't understand your current capacity levels? These are the questions that separate firms that scale sustainably from the firms that scale into chaos. If you're thinking about these questions and want to talk through your specific situation, I run a 20-minute assessment where we look at what's happening in your firm. No pitch, no pressure, just a conversation. The link is in the description if that's useful. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. And we're going to talk about 3 rules every profitable firm follows and why you're probably breaking them. Thanks for watching.